Hello, friends. I am Preston Sprinkle, and I'm here with my friend Tim Mackey, a fellow Bible scholar, man of the church. And if I could say, not your traditional kind of Bible scholar, you'll see what I mean as we progress in this conversation. But you're listening to Theology in the Raw, where we like to talk about tough subjects in the Christian faith and also like to interview some interesting people doing interesting work around the Christian world. And I am here with Tim Mackey. Tim, thanks so much for being on Theology in the Raw.
Yeah, absolutely, Preston. It's good to talk.
So you are, from my vantage point, most widely known for your work in the Bible Project. I mean, this has been I cannot think of a greater gift to the church than the Bible Project right now. I mean, this is just such an incredible resource used by such a wide variety of people. I mean, I talk to people who would be more quote unquote progressive, people who are very conservative, everybody in between. Everybody loves the Bible Project. Like, this is just like, it's such a gift for the church. So just to get us going, can you give us a little bit of background on who you are as a man of God, a scholar, a pastor, and then also how you got into the Bible Project, and we'll go from there.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Let's see. All right. I grew up in Portland. Not known as a paragon of Christian anything in American culture, whatever. But it's an American city on the West Coast. So yeah, I grew up here skateboarding. My parents were Christians. I didn't really like church, and I despised most of it. I don't know, from a pretty early age. Yeah, I still don't know quite why. I think it was just, I got hooked. I got my first skateboard at 11 years old, and it was hook, line, and sinker, whole deal. And the whole ethos of that is like, just stick it to the man.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So my parents represent the man, and of course, so does Jesus and the whole deal. So
were you raised in the church though? Were you outside?
Our family attended church, and they picked their battles with me, by the time I was in my early, 13, 14. And so they just quit making me go, except like on holidays and family stuff, that kind of thing. So yeah, I didn't participate, no youth group, camp, or anything like that. So it was actually through an outreach ministry to skateboarders at a skate park, a public skate park, but that was sponsored and run by a church, that I became a follower of Jesus when I was 20, almost 20. Wow. And I had just been going to the park for years. Somebody every week stands up and gives a Jesus talk. And just years, Jesus worked on me. He became really beautiful to me. And then unavoidable, I found I had to make a decision about him. And so there you go. That was a pretty radical kind of conversion experience in terms of the trajectory of my life. And so Multnomah University, it was Multnomah Bible College then, was across the street from that warehouse skate park.
Oh, wow.
In Northeast Portland. And so I had a couple friends. We'd all gone to skate church. We all became Christians around the same time, started following Jesus. And so we signed up for classes together. And a number of us went overseas, like within a year. We went and spent a summer in the jungle with Bible translators, like Wycliffe, super, super intense. And I came back. I was like, I want to follow Jesus. I want to do whatever. And so I signed up for Greek, naturally. But this community was that I learned how to follow Jesus in. It was like awesome people. It's like just incredible community. It was the full mid 90s, jars of clay, acoustic, read your Bible a ton, memorize whole sections. It was awesome. It was awesome. I loved it. Yeah. And it was totally new to me. And it was all in skateboard culture with my friends. Anyway, so I became a Bible nerd, got hooked. And with a couple of these friends, we signed up for Greek and then Hebrew. And really the key was I was introduced by one professor and then a few others to the Bible as Israelite Jewish literature. Yeah. That Jewish literature and a Jewish Jesus is how this God has revealed himself to humanity. And that was so odd It wasn't like the package that I was familiar with from my parents, the Christian belief package, but it was way more interesting. And so the history, language, culture, there you go.
Yeah.
So pretty much since then, then I went into PhD studies and got my PhD in a Jewish studies department at the University of Wisconsin.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So if people don't know, that is a really high-powered Semitic studies program, right?
Yeah, it was the deep end of the pool.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was awesome. I wanted to get outside the typical kind of Christian world for theological education. And this wasn't a theology degree. It was language and history.
Yeah.
And there were Jews and Christians of all stripes there. It was wonderful. And I mean, I just basically read nonstop for 7 years. But it was wonderful. You've done, you know how that goes. And so, but what I found was personally, when I started to teach in a university setting, I did student teaching. I didn't like it. And I didn't like that I had to be diplomatic in how I talked about my own faith in a public university setting. And so, I'm most of the way through my PhD, and I'm like, I don't think I want to be a professor at a university. Like, what am I going to do? So, but an opportunity to start teaching at our church we were attending opened up. And then
Blackhawk, right?
That's right. Blackhawk Church.
I spoke there a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, I heard about that. Well, there you go. Yeah. So really healthy, awesome church. It was really oriented towards making an impact in the university and integrating into the life of students and faculty. And so I just taught classes at the church to graduate students and faculty. Wow. So I just started teaching biblical theology and had a blast, learned how to preach, and there you go. So then I've been on this path of, I don't know what I am. Am I a pastor? Am I a professor? I stopped trying to figure that out and just enjoyed trying to be a bridge figure. Because I love biblical scholarship, but I don't want to participate in the career culture.
It's so good. That's a great word. Yeah, I get it.
So anyway, there you go. So the Bible Project happened through a friend of mine that I met at Multnomah. While I was reading for 7 years, he had started a marketing company, John Collins, and then he happened upon the medium of the short animated explainer video.
Yeah.
And so he had honed that. He had built out a small animation studio. And then when I moved back to Portland to teach part-time at Western, part-time, and then a pastor at a church here in Portland, he pitched the idea to me of like, hey, I make these videos. You're a Bible nerd. We're friends. Let's make some videos and see what happens.
No way.
So it was really, truly like just kind of a harebrained idea. And we spent 1.5 years, just a side project, making the first 2 videos.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And then, what day is today? May 15th. So we turned 4 years old on Saturday.
Is that it? 4 years old?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I thought it was like 8 years old at least or something. Wow, 4 years old.
Yeah. In terms of the YouTube channel went live.
Wow.
So John, so here's the thing. I'm the Bible nerd, and John loves biblical theology and loves to talk. He's an incessant question asker, so thorough.
Yeah.
And so just the chemistry of our friendship, we just love to talk and learn from each other and learn from our conversations. And so the videos are basically just a distillation of conversations that John and I are having through the whole Bible, themes, books of the Bible.
Right.
And and it was his idea to do crowdfunded. So instead of making our own website and you have to pay to watch,
right?
We'll just wave to people at the end of every video that's for free on YouTube, and then just ask, hey, if this was helpful to you, help us make some more. And that has
worked out well, right?
Yeah, overwhelmingly. Yeah, it turns out there's a lot of people in the world who care, who really love it when they're actually able to understand the Bible on its terms.
If you're not comfortable giving the numbers, I'm totally fine. But I mean, I know a tiny bit about that world, and I know those videos are not cheap. Can you?
Sure.
Could
Yeah.
you give a ballpark on what a
Yeah.
typical 5 to 10 minute, 5 to 7
Mhm.
minute Bible project
Mhm.
video might cost from A to Z?
Yeah, it depends on, we make a lot of different styles. So some we make that are basically just, you're watching a big illustrated poster diagram get drawn
Yeah.
while I give like a superpower lecture. And so those come in at about like $8,000 to $10,000 for, and those are typically 7 to 8 minutes long.
Okay.
Our 5-minute-ish full color animated ones, depending on the style, sometimes it's stick people, sometimes it's full blown,
Yeah.
range anywhere from like $15,000 to $30,000 a piece.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was, first, John and I just volunteered. It was just a side project. And as our monthly support grew, it was just about keeping artists on for more and more of their time to just be able to dedicate their work. And we kind of hit this tipping point about 2.5 years ago where we could then begin to float, both John and I dedicating more time and float just the organization as a whole. And and now, it's remarkable. We have about 9,000 monthly supporters now.
Wow.
And we're going to hit 1 million YouTube subscribers by the end of this year. I don't even understand what that means. It's been a remarkable journey. Really, really amazing. It's truly a team effort. I get to be a nerd and read and write and talk with John, and then help on the front end of storyboarding and some visual development. And then once we get those things locked in, I just let the artists take over because they think of stuff way better than I could ever think of. So it's been really fun.
This is your full-time job, right? Or are you still pastoring?
So as of a year ago, a little over a year ago, I switched over to make this my full-time gig. Wow. Yeah, it's crazy.
And you guys have, you have a video on every single book of the Bible. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have. I think it's 115 videos total right now.
115. Okay.
So every book of the Bible, we have about a dozen biblical theme videos.
Okay.
Or theme. We have a How to Read the Bible series that we're about 10 into, and then we're doing animated little trilogies or quadrilogies. I don't know. Hep 5 parts where we go through a section of the Bible, but with really beautiful animation, and it's really simplified down to its essence. We did the wisdom books. We did series on the Torah. We did Luke, and we're gonna do Acts this year. And we can see about 3 to 4 years more of videos we'd like to make. Okay. And half of that list came into our minds in the last year. So we're just enjoying the ride and trying to be responsible.
You might be putting Bible college professors out of business. No, I'm serious. So I remember a couple of years ago, I really started watching a lot of videos, and I remember, and I was teaching Old Testament survey at a Bible college, small Bible college, and I would watch, as part of my preparation, I would watch a Bible college or a Bible project video, like Psalms, on the Psalms.
Yeah, sure.
I'll never forget. A couple days before I'm going to give my lecture, and I said, I'm going to check out what Mackie and Collins have to say about this. I'd watch your video, jaw on the ground, thinking, I'm going to cancel class. I'm going to just have them watch the video like 5 times. And I'm going to give a quiz on that video because there's way more that you do in that video than I could ever do in a 2-3 hour lecture. Like, it's just like, I don't.
Yeah, there's something, the combination of the visual medium with power lecture for some of them. And some of them are just John and I having a distilled conversation of an actual conversation that, we had upstream of the video. And the combination, John loves brain science. And so that's part of when he was kind of crafting the skill and figuring out the possibility of these videos. There's some ratio of brain engagement with length of time being not too long, but short, visual, oral, you're hearing, you're seeing, short time. You can do more in 5 minutes than you could in a lecture room in 60 minutes.
Really?
In terms of what your brain's able to isn't that remarkable?
That's amazing.
So he's really taught me the less is more principle when it
Yes,
comes to
yes,
these
yes.
videos. The cutting room floor is piled high with stuff when we're finally done. There's so much stuff we leave out.
Oh,
But I've
man.
come to see that's a value in at least in these videos. Anyway, it's great. It's been an amazing journey.
So are you from an outside perspective, it seems like you have like for a Bible nerd, it's like you have like the dream job. You get to be a scholar, you get to produce stuff that tons of people are watching, a wide spectrum of Christians, evangelicals, whatever, really like you and your stuff. It's like, who doesn't want to learn more about the Bible? Like, what's the con? Like, what's the, are you,
yeah.
What part of your job do you not like? Or is there?
Yeah, totally. For me, the biggest challenge has been, as part-time professor, I was in local church ministry, and this was getting off the ground.
Okay.
So I have about a 3-year period where I can now see I was going crazy.
Doing too much.
Doing way too much. So to be honest, I'm just like 2018 I feel like it's the first time since I started grad school over long time.
Yeah.
I've been living over my skis. And so I'm just grateful to be in a place where I was like, I have a job with a workload that I can accomplish.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I really advocate having one job for people. Anyway,
I have one more Bible project question, and then
it's great.
Then I want to get to know.
Yeah, there aren't many cons. I really am pinching myself at this season of the project. It's pretty.
So I don't know how to say this. When I see the quality and the demand of Bible Project, part of me goes to, gosh, they could really monetize these things. Like these are, so much time, energy, money. Like you could charge money for these, and it wouldn't even be like, oh, now he's trying to make money. No, like this is like worth it. But you guys, is it in principle, and are you guys like, is this etched in stone that you will never? These will always be free? And is it because you have enough support from donor support? Or can you unpack that a little bit? Just kind of how the Bible Project and money and monetizing it kind of is related?
Yeah, you're right. One of our core values is generosity as an organization. And we really believe in the gospel generosity ecology, right? The ecosystem that generosity creates. And so it was really important to John, and it didn't take him long to convince me that we would actually come out better in the long run with this project if we didn't make a paywall or a subscription or anything. And so I just trusted him, and he was right. So in terms of videos, stuff that we produce, will always be available for free on our YouTube channel. We have some broadcasters or media organizations have picked it up, and our main license is just, if you put it behind a paywall as an organization, then you need to pay us licensing fees. If you're going to pay people to watch it, then tell them to come watch it here for free. And if they, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, because I think the barrier entry to be zero. Yeah. The Bible's hard enough to work, so why should, anyway. So yes, that's a principle, that it all is for free.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Tim Mackey, the person, you already said, you're a skateboarder. You're a man of the church. You are very gospel centered, Jesus centered. You're also a scholar. Where on the, if I can say, evangelical, spectrum, the theological spectrum, where's your journey been? Were you raised super conservative and now you're centrist? Were you progressive and now you're conservative? I don't actually like any of those terms. How would you describe your sort of theological sort of subculture?
Yeah, well, I guess, the environment, like the skateboard ministry, could be put in the broad category of extremely theologically conservative American Protestantism. There wasn't a political culture war slant to it. It was a progressive outreach ministry in an urban setting to skateboarders. So culturally it wasn't conservative looking, but just in terms of approach to the Bible, ways of reading the Bible. My introduction to the Bible, was in that kind of setting. Multnomah is in that same category too, but the professors I was most attracted to were the ones who were actually interested in just exploring the oddity of the Bible and how it doesn't actually fit our systems very well.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself drawn to those teachers. And so I think that's why I ended up fascinated with history and language and the culture behind the Bible, was because it's messy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, there you go. So I have a really firm commitment to historic Orthodox Christian worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And my commitment actually even is so strong that as I've learned more and more and more about Second Temple Judaism and the Jewish messianic nature of the early Christian movement and how much of that got lost in the history of Christian Orthodoxy. So I'm not like a Hebrew roots guy necessarily, but I'm pretty pro rediscover the lost Jewish heritage.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Because it's just the Bible. What I mean when I say that is the Bible. There you go. I'm nervous about the term evangelical, mostly because of the last, couple decades of redefinition of that word. And so I just prefer historic Christian Orthodox kind of thing.
I'm curious about that. I've got several friends that we have this kind of ongoing dialogue about whether the term evangelical needs to be rebranded or ditched.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does it? And I don't, depending on the time of the day, time of the week, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. It is so loaded with political stuff. It has it's collected kind of a bad reputation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yet at the core, I love what the term's trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And yet, I don't know.
It's tricky. It's not an English word. It's a Greek word spelled with English letters. Right. But we have those: baptism, the Eucharist, whatever. There's lots of those in Christian vocabulary. But something about that word in particular, especially because there's so many other readily available substitutes that communicate the same thing. For me, it's about communication efficiency. Yeah. If a word is going to distract more than half of the people I'm trying to communicate with, when there's perfectly other good words that are actually more normal, then why don't I just use those words?
What would be a good substitute? I mean, you said historic Christian or?
Oh, if I'm talking to Christians about where I would locate, I am happily identified with historic Orthodox Christian belief and theology. If I'm talking to somebody who doesn't have a framework for that, I would just use words like Jesus-centered, a high view of the authority of Jesus's teachings and of the scriptures that he appealed to, and it's like normal language. So it's a big deal for the Bible Project, but it comes out of my own personality too, and maybe it's just because of Skate Church. That was the name of the skate park. Skate Church. But it's just like Jesus became compelling because going to that skate park every week, he was talked about in language I could understand. And so that's from early on. I grasped who Jesus was because of other skateboarders using illustrations about ramps and like skateboard parts to talk about the Bible. And so
I don't know that world. I actually skated when I was a kid, but I never was like a skate park type kid. But skate church,
So and I know that part of becoming a Christian means start learning new vocabulary. I get that. Yeah. But there are some times where there's perfectly other good words. So evangelical. I mean, that's complex, and there's people that have very passionate opinions, and I'm not trying to put a position out there. But in my context here, and for what we're doing with the Bible Project, just the word's not gonna help us. So that's why we don't use it.
Who listens to the Bible who watches the Bible Project? Do you have a really it seems to me like a really broad range of brands of
Yeah.
Christianity.
Yeah, that's right.
Would that be accurate, or is it largely
Yep.
conservatives? Or
No, it's the whole spectrum, and we have different kinds of analytics. YouTube gives us a lot of geography,
okay,
gender, age demographics. So 60% male, 18 to 35
okay,
is 60% of our
really?
YouTube subscribers, which is a pretty big sample. It's coming up on 1 million. So that's a pretty reliable percentage.
Right.
So that's interesting. That's also that's a general YouTube demographic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
But and then in feedback that we get, yeah, the whole spectrum: Catholic, Orthodox, Protestants of all stripes, whatever, everything. To me, the most rewarding feedback we get is from people who don't identify as religious anything, but they feel like they're able to understand what their parents or coworkers or friends believe now. And I can see, I mean, we straight up have had letters and emails from self-identified atheists saying, thank you for what you're doing. You're helping demystify what I used to believe.
That's really cool.
Yeah, but there's something for me, just if you don't let the debates of our age determine what you're looking for. And to me, this has become the biggest challenge and project now, as I can see, is just to hear the Bible on its own terms, not filtered through what I want it to speak to, but really trying to listen to it and learn to read this literature along the weave, or going with the grain.
Yeah.
And you'll hear all kinds of things you never expected to hear. And but it also, you find that many of the things that seemed so important maybe aren't quite as important as I thought they were. Anyway, it's been a great journey.
So speaking of journeys, we were talking before the show about some different theological journeys you've been on. And one of the questions that, I mean, in the nature of what I do, most of the questions I get have to do with sexuality, gender, LGBTQ related questions.
Yes.
I would say,
thank you. By the way, thank you for the work that you've invested in those questions.
Man. Yeah,
seriously, it's been helpful to so many people.
Good, thank you. That's coming from you. That means a ton, man. One of the questions that I haven't, and I've kind of thought out loud about this on my podcast, and a lot of my audience, I think, is trying to figure this out too. It really does have to do with like women leadership positions in church, women's ordination, women teaching, however you want to word it. I don't like women in ministry, because ministry is a broad word that, of course, women should be in ministry. The question of women, does the Bible, allow, encourage women in leadership positions? And we're talking earlier how you've shifted on that, where you were on a more complementarian, that only men should be in leadership positions in the church. But more recently, out of studying the Bible, you switched your view. Can you unpack that a bit for?
Yeah. It has gone in steps. And I've only once, for about 5 years, been in a position where I could speak into that issue in a local church. So I was here in Portland at Door of Hope Church. I served as a pastor for about 5 years. So, that was I had 5 years in an environment where it wasn't just about figuring out theologically and biblically how it works, but actually, what does this look like practically? So those have been two really different, important learning environments for me. But I've always, I seriously, I remember reading Bible reading Paul's letters for the first time. It's still like a memory that I have. And there were so many puzzling things in there, but definitely 1 Corinthians 14 and 11. These are some of the classic passages where Paul says comments about some women in these churches and what they were doing. And I was just like, whoa, that's really interesting. Like that doesn't fit. Well, let me say it this way. I was introduced to the Bible through Jesus. I didn't care about the Bible. Jesus became beautiful and compelling to me. And so I just really read the Gospels a lot, and that was my first entryway into the Bible. And so I remember from the very beginning just thinking like, the thing that Jesus was doing with these kingdom of God communities, and then what I see Paul carrying that on, but then there's just these handful of passages, Corinthians, there's a couple. Letter to Timothy, there's a couple. And how do they fit? Because the way that I see people appealing to those texts in Paul and the things that they're building out of those, there's a disconnect. So before I even had language for it, I've always tried to understand, like, what's going on here. It was always the disconnect for me. So anyway, yeah, where I'm at now, and I'm not happy with the terms of the debate, but in terms of, I'll try and summarize it quickly because I'm bad at being concise. I told you that. So I think what we see in the New Testament, what we see in Paul's letters, is an urban missionary who is trying to steward the announcement of good news about King Jesus, that through his life, death, and resurrection, whole new future open to humanity, and through the Spirit, the life and love of Jesus can remake us individually and corporately together. And Paul's gospel of freedom, right? Not slavery to idolatry or to certain interpretations of the Torah anymore. And if you look at what Paul, like the people that he mentioned in his letters, who he talks about as his co-workers, he mentions men and women, like all over the place as his co-workers. And, you know, in the first century, to have women in the roles that Paul puts them in, in his greetings, you know, when he talks about Aquila and Priscilla, yeah, or Phoebe, or Junia. I know there's some debate on Junia, but there shouldn't be. I mean, it's really remarkable. Like the on the ground communities that he describes and that we see at work in the book of Acts are communities where women are being given a social mobility and a status and honor in those communities that was unknown in the first century. There was no parallel to it. And so this is for sure why, one of the many reasons, Larry Hurtado and Rodney Stark, historians of early Christianity, tell us that this was one of the main reasons Christianity grew. Yeah. So all that stuff started to sink in. And then all of a sudden I was able to come back to 1 Corinthians 11, where Paul is telling certain women, I mean, these are really complicated passages about head covering and so on. In 1 Corinthians 14, about evaluating prophecy. And the more I've read and studied those texts, the more I see Paul using contextual strategies so that the witness of the gospel isn't compromised by people abusing this new freedom of these that men and women have in these communities. I think that almost every time you see Paul hedging in a particular church community, and there's not that many, there's Corinth and there's Ephesus, basically, are precisely contexts where new Christian women would be most likely to overuse their new freedom found in the early Christian communities. And then that's precisely what you see. I'm not being concise, am I?
Okay, so let's go to and we don't need to get nitty gritty, but the 1 Timothy 2. I mean, that's
that's right. Yep, that's right.
And I know there's a massive debate about when he says, "I do not permit women to teach or exercise authority."
That's right. Yep.
In particular, and again, I haven't done a lot of study on it, but the exercising authority, authutane or whatever, it's a really unique word, and there's a lot of debate of whether it's an intrinsically negative kind of authority, which would rule out all types of authority, or whether he is ruling out all types of authority.
And
then you have him appealing to the creation account. It's kind of a messy passage. I remember looking at the bibliography of a commentary a few weeks ago, actually. And I'm like, I just want to give up. I'll just focus on something easy, like LGBTQ questions.
Totally.
Like, I don't have time to read literally like 25 books written just on this verse. And hundreds of articles, all with good arguments, you know. But.
So the problem is, you know, that one paragraph attracts all the attention. To me, it was most helpful was starting to read people who were talking about the communication strategy and the themes of that letter as a whole. From the opening paragraph to the final paragraph, that letter is putting out a whole bunch of fires in Ephesus. Okay. Specifically from opening lines, caused by false teachers who were deceiving people in the community, especially by their interpretations of the Torah. He says it in the opening paragraph that myths and genealogies connected to the Torah are at the root of the false teachers and what they're doing. And then in more than one place throughout the letter, he makes clear that the false teachers are targeting wealthy, influential women in the community, and some of whom are widowed. With that whole thing about the widows and like wealthy widows who have means to take care of themselves and that whole thing, it's all connected. And so in my mind, the most compelling explanation is that Paul's putting the kibosh on a group of influential, elite, wealthy women who treat the Sunday gathering as a fashion show and have grabbed the mic, but they're not theologically trained yet. And so he just says, dude, start over. Those, right? The ladies don't teach. Let them gain a theological education. Let's do this whole thing over again.
So when he says women, I do not allow women to teach, exercise authority. He is thinking specifically of a specific kind of woman in the church at Ephesus in that particular cultural context. Like,
yeah, that's right.
Kinds of women I don't allow.
That's right. And I actually think that makes the most sense of his appeal to the Genesis 3 story as well.
Yeah, that one always throws me off, yeah.
Because Eve, when he says and talks about, it was the woman deceived and not the man, many people take him to be deriving a universal principle from that. So somehow women are more susceptible to being deceived. But Paul talks about Eve's deception and temptation in his second letter to the Corinthians. And he tells the whole church of Corinth not to be deceived like Eve. So for Paul, the Eve deception story, he can use it to describe all kinds of different people, not just women. Does that make sense? In other words,
he's not appealing to Eve as a symbol of femalehood, like what Eve
that's right.
did.
Right. That's right.
Is based on her femaleness, and therefore all females are more prone to deception.
Yeah, that's right.
You're saying he's just using that as just an example.
It's an example of how there's that little glitch in the Genesis 3 narrative, and Jewish interpreters from a long time ago have picked up on this, where it's the Adam, the male human, given the divine instruction in Genesis 2. But then in chapter 3, the woman she knows about it, but we're not told how she knows about it. We're not told of the conversation. And then it's precisely, she misquotes the divine command. She says, God says, don't eat of it and don't touch it.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of really interesting other things going on there. And then that's what the snake capitalizes on, is now it all becomes these series of little misquotations. And so what Paul highlights is precisely that breakdown of passing along the divine instruction, which creates a perfect parallel with these women. They haven't been properly instructed, and so what they need to do is take a time out and get an education, and they shouldn't be the ones teaching the community right now. So I actually think it makes better sense of his comment. Ben Witherington has a commentary on the pastoral epistles.
Yeah.
And he works really carefully through that text, wades through the massive bibliography. Okay. And he's not the only one who says that, but he kind of brings together that people who advocate that reading of the passage. And he does it in the context of the whole book. Holy cow. Anyway, there you go.
I was going to ask you for people, voices, writers, speakers.
Yes. And the other most significant contributor to this is a scholar, Cynthia Westfall Long.
Yeah.
Who's written a book called Paul and Gender.
Yeah.
It's fat, and it's systematic through all his letters. She's developing a Paul's theology of male and female, distinct profile, and their relationship. It's brilliant. It's so brilliant. And to be honest, that's what kind of compelled me to finally embrace again, what category, why I don't like egalitarian as a title is because that equality in our cultural setting can be heard by people as erasing gender difference.
Yes.
And to me, that's precisely the opposite of what this whole thing is about. The whole point is that Genesis 1, it's male and female, one humanity consisting of two gendered others, and that otherness in unity is the image of God. And so it's precisely the difference of gender that, when it's brought together in the unity of the Spirit of Jesus to reflect the wisdom and love of God and teaching and instruction and what it means to be human as a community of Jesus together, it's in the gender difference that the beauty of the thing is shown. And so, some people use the term mutualism. Mutualism. I kind of like that, but whatever. I think Paul, when we watch him saying his comments that we often misread as misogynistic, is Paul putting out fires. And if you look at the people he names, at the way he talks about power and leadership and authority, the leadership communities were as mutualist as their cultural setting allowed to be effective. But he cared mostly about the effective witness of the gospel. And so, like you see him in Titus, he's really concerned about the behavior of the women there, and also of older men who drink too much, right? Because their behavior is going to make the Christian communities look repulsive, even to their pagan neighbors.
Right.
And so that's what he cares about. So anyway, I explored some of this in the videos about Paul in the Bible Project, but anyway, there you go. I could go on a lot longer. You could too, obviously. But
Tim, this is super helpful. My audience, I think, is going to appreciate this. So
Great.
Thanks for your honesty. I love getting
absolutely.
people as they're kind of fresh and the cement is still a little bit wet as they're exploring. And one thing I just love is to see people wrestle with Scripture and see where's Scripture taking me. And I'm going to work hard not to project where I want Scripture to go onto the Scripture.
Totally.
But let Scripture critique my presuppositions.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the most difficult thing to do. I think that's why, anything I say now, I'm always hesitant to say anything now, because it's like, well, this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
But there's so many things where I just have had 5 more years to reflect on Genesis, whatever. And now I can feel I have more clarity. Tim Keller has a saying, "You're always stupid now." Like, instead, when you look back at yourself a year ago, man, I didn't get it.
So stupid back then.
And there's like, just start telling yourself, I'm stupid now. And then at least it makes you humble in the moment.
My wife and I often talk about, how we look at like our older generation, how they did things. We're like, man, how come they weren't more teachable and like understanding and so authoritative top down or whatever. And like, but we often say, well, okay, in 40 years, what are going to be our
totally.
Our kids are going to be like, how could you think that way? How could you think that this was the right way to do things? And
that's right.
I think just having an ongoing posture of humility, is the key.
Yeah, it's all we can do.
Well, Tim, love what you're doing for the kingdom. Again, I don't think I've actually explained too much about the Bible Project, but I'm assuming most of my audience, 90% will know about it.
Sure.
Where can they find the Bible Project, just in case they don't know what it is? How can they learn more about you?
Yeah, got it. Just you can Google the Bible Project, or just thebibleproject.com is our website.
Okay.
Or go to YouTube and search Bible Project. Go to your computer, go to the interweb, and so our short description: we're a nonprofit, crowd-funded animation studio.
Okay.
Short films about all the books of the Bible, the literary theme, design, and themes that run throughout the Bible. Cool. And we believe the Bible is one unified story that leads to Jesus.
Love it.
That should be offered free to the world so that everyone can see that for themselves.
Highly, highly encourage my audience to go check that out if you haven't done so. And if you haven't done so in the last 6 months or a year, you guys are really cranking out a lot of videos in the last year, especially. So go visit Bible Project. And I've taken my kids through a lot of the videos. So like from my,
sweet.
Gosh, from me as a 42-year-old Bible scholar professor, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what Psalms. And my 9-year-old is like, oh, so that's what,
totally.
It's so brilliant. Like it's like kids can understand it, and yet Bible college professors can be
Yeah.
discouraged by watching it because we're like, crap, I can't match that. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. You know, it's funny. We have never sat down in any video and thought about kids as
oh
but I think it's just the visual medium
yeah.
and the commitment John had, and that I've full on adopted, is just to simplicity and communication.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
simplistic,
No.
but simplicity and communication can really bridge a wide audience.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so funny. We'll get into a video project. That just happened with a video we were working on, and we thought we were clear with draft 3 of the script. And then all of a sudden, some artists pointed out some things. We're like, oh, that's not clear at all. Oh my gosh, we thought that was clear. So it's hard to be clear, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's
You
super
know this.
Oh,
Yeah. Preston, you're a good writer. You're like a good communicator to
thanks, man.
a broad audience, and it's an enormous amount of work.
Oh, it's so hard. It's so
Yeah.
hard. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Tim. And I hope lots of people go to your website and YouTube channel as a result of this talk.
Yeah, so, Preston. Cheers.
Thanks so much. You've been listening to Theology in the Raw. If you want to check out the pod, so this is both a YouTube video. So if you're listening to this, go to my YouTube channel, Preston Sprinkle, and you will find a video portion of this talk. If you're on YouTube and you just want to podcast it, this is also a podcast without the video. You can go there as well. So thanks so much for listening to Theology in the Raw.